Salam sejahtera dan salam perpaduan, and a very blissful morning. Welcome to this beautiful and cheerful morning for today's MPOB-UKM public lecture, Governing Sustainability and Palm Oil, Lessons from Hybrid Governance Arrangements in the European Union. Yang berbahagia, Profesor Dr. Norman Mohamed Saleh, Dean of Faculty of Economics and Management. Yang berbahagia, Associate Professor Dr. Hawati Janur, Manager of MPOB Endowment Chair. Our distinguished speaker, Yang berbahagia, Professor Engineer Dr. Peter Oosterveer, MPOB-UKM Chairholder. Yang berbahagia, Mr. Balu Nambiapan, Director of Economics and Industry Development Division, Malaysia Palm Oil Board, and members of the floor. Thank you so much to all of you for coming today, as we are offering the excellent opportunity and sharing experiences in the field of governing sustainability and palm oil lessons from hybrid governance arrangement in the European Union. Without any further delay, we would like to invite Mr. Hamad Najat bin Ayub for the Dua recitation. Please welcome.
Al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Hamdan hamidin, hamdan yuwafi ni'amahu wa yukafi'u mazidah. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhikal karimi wa azimi sultanik. Allahumma shalli wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma ya mujibas sa'ilin. Ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami yang Maha Pemurah lagi Maha Penyayang. Kami berhimpun di sini pada hari ini sempena MPOB-UKM Public Lecture ini. Kami memohon rahmat dan hidayah-Mu semoga diberikan cahaya petunjuk kepada hati kami. Engkau perkukuhkanlah perpaduan kami. Engkau berkatilah usaha kami, ya Allah. Allahumma ya azizu ya qahar. Ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami yang memiliki segala kekuasaan dan kemuliaan, kurniakanlah taufik dan hidayah-Mu sebagai panduan. Restuilah perancangan, perbincangan dan ilmu yang Kau berikan, ya Allah. Ya Sattar, ya Alim, ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami pohon limpah rahmat, taufik dan hidayah-Mu kepada pemimpin-pemimpin kami dan seluruh rakyat negara kami yang tercinta. Mantapkanlah semangat dan keazaman mereka dengan penuh kesabaran dalam memikul tanggungjawab mereka. Rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina azabannar. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wassalamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Thank you, Mr. Hamad Najat, for the dua. May our public lecture today be blessed and run smoothly. Members of audience, ladies and gentlemen, we respectfully invite Yang berbahagia Professor Dr. Norman Mohamed Saleh, Dean of Faculty of Economics and Management, to deliver his welcoming address. Please welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning. Yang berbahagia Prof. Dr. Peter Oosterveer, MPOB-UKM Chairholder from Wageningen University, Associate Professor Dr. Hawati Janur, Manager of MPOB-UKM Endowment Chair, Mr. Balu, Director of Economics and Industry Development Division, MPOB, distinguished guests, MPOB, UKM, and our post researchers, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our distinguished Prof. Peter Oosterveer, MPOB-UKM Chairholder from the Netherlands, and all who are present today to this public lecture at UKM. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on May 18, 2017, last year, was a special birthday event of Malaysian palm oil. It celebrates the 100th anniversary of its existence in Malaysia. Today, Malaysia is the second largest producer of palm oil in the world after Indonesia. Oil palm plantation currently occupy over 5 million hectares, while palm oil accounts for almost 6% of the country's GDP. According to the Malaysian Palm Oil Council, Malaysia accounts for 29% of world palm oil production and 37% of world exports. Oil palm is seen as a very lucrative crop due to its many beneficial characteristics. It may be not now. It is the largest yielding oilseed crop with outputs of about 3 to 4 tons of crude palm oil, CPO per hectare, per year in major palm oil producing countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia. Oil palm end products, which is the CPO and crude palm kernel oil, have multiple uses as it can be processed into foodstuffs, cosmetics, plastics, detergents, and other industrial and agricultural chemical, and also as biofuel crop. Nonetheless, the continuous growth has not been without conflict. This is what we are going to discuss today. In recent years, oil palm development has been a major topic of discussion. On the one hand, palm oil production is seen as a driver of socio-economic development, poverty alleviation, and rural development. On the other hand, it raises environmental concerns in terms of deforestation, pollution, and habitat loss. Also social concerns in terms of human rights and land conflicts. For the last decade and a half, the European Union experimented with novel, hybrid, both private and public, governance arrangement for the production, import, and use of sustainable biofuels for its transport sector. It is now an important juncture in its biofuel policies, with sustainability debates continuing to rage within the EU and beyond, and important changes being considered and implemented with regard to future policy choices. One major decision by the European Parliament in January 2018 in regards to palm oil is to phase out the use of palm oil as a feedstock for production of biofuels by 2021. These may affect the import demand of palm oil. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, these issues have raised questions about the sustainability of the palm oil sector and have been at the forefront of setting up governance arrangements in terms of standards and networks aimed at producing palm oil in a more sustainable way, as for example the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, RSPO, and Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil, MSPO. I believe that governance and sustainability are not new subjects in the context of economic development. Many nations, both developed and developing, have collaborated to address common problems that are related to these subjects. The concept of sustainable development has long been entrenched in Malaysia's national development planning process since 1990s. Sustainable development, which consists of economic, environment, and social components, which sometimes is referred as the triple bottom line, are essential and crucial in achieving sustainable development. In this regard, governance play an important component that integrates the triple bottom line. So I'm myself is in the area of governance, and I totally agree that we have to be at the center of the issue, which is the governance of the processes that we are into the palm oil industry. Thus, the theme for today's public lecture, Governing Sustainability and Palm Oil, Lessons from Hybrid Governance Arrangement in the EU, is very timely, relevant, and significant. The choice of MPOB at UKM for Prof. Peter to deliver his public lecture on such topic today manifests recognition to the MPOB at UKM as a research arm for the FEP UKM and FSSK, specializing in research on socio-economic disciplines for the palm oil industry. It is an honor to have the distinguished Prof. Peter as our eminent speaker to share his expertise and knowledge on a topic that is of interest to many at the present time. I just talked to Prof. Peter. He's in the middle of writing 2 books on agriculture, economics, and also governance. Okay, I hope these sections will highlight possible avenues for cooperation between government agencies, universities, ministries, and countries, and also come up with beneficial cutting-edge resolutions which can positively impact the economic development of Malaysia. In closing, I wish to express my gratitude to all participants for the full cooperation and contribution to this session. I take this opportunity to thank MPOB-UKM and our Chair, Faculty of Economics and Management, for organizing this session, and specifically to MPOB for their fullest support for this event. Thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please rise for a group photo session, and it will be a pleasure if everyone moves to the center of the room for the photo session. We shall start our public lecture on governing sustainability and palm oil, lessons from hybrid governance arrangement in the European Union. And now, let us invite Professor Engineer Dr. Peter Oosterveer, MPOB-UKM shareholder, as our distinguished speaker today to deliver his lecture. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair, for this very kind introduction. Distinguished guest, Professor Endowment, Associate Professor Dr. Hawati, Dr. Balu, very kindly. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to give this presentation to you. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and to be able to talk with you about some of the thoughts of reflecting on sustainability and palm oil, which is indeed an important challenge for Malaysia, but also for other countries in the world, not only producing countries, but also importing countries. So that's why I would like to use this morning to give a presentation on a number of issues. First, I want to explore a little bit the challenges that palm oil currently is facing, and then give an overview of the multiple palm oil sustainability initiatives that are going on, involving government, involving private sector, involving combinations of public and private sector, which creates a very confusing landscape, as I will show in the end. And then this complexity and the remaining challenges that are there are the background for reflecting on how to deal with these problems and which way forward we can identify. So that's where we come with the conclusions. Of course, you are all familiar with palm oil and its background, but it may be good to position that in a little bit in a broader perspective. So first, the most recent figures I could find on palm oil exports, where you can see Indonesia on top as the largest exporter of of palm oil, but Malaysia very closely second, far beyond any of the other exporting countries. The red line is Papua New Guinea, and then below that you have Guatemala and Colombia. The blue line here covers all the other exporters, all the different countries from different parts of the world. So there's a real big gap between the two main exporters of palm oil, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the rest of the world. Although increasingly you can see that palm oil is being produced not just in Southeast Asia, but also in Africa and in Latin America. As you can see here, also Guatemala and Colombia are becoming exporters, not on definitely not on the scale that Indonesia and Malaysia are, but they are growing, and also some investments have been made in countries like Peru and Brazil. So there is an expansion of the area where palm oil is being produced, but still very much dominated by Southeast Asia. So in terms of the export, that's clear, and you can also see there's not a clear downward trend in terms of the export. It's still, these are figures from the US Department of Agriculture. So they even expect the coming year to continue this level of export. In terms of importers, there are basically three main importing markets for palm oil. The largest one on top is India. Currently the largest importing palm oil importing country. Then the red one, the second line, is Europe, and the third line is China. And as you can see from this graph, it goes up to 2016. China is clearly going down compared to the imports yes, that they had before. Europe more or less at the same level, slightly going down, and also India at the highest level, but also slightly going down. So there is a mismatch, you could say, with the potential production and the importing countries' demands. Although other parts of the world are also importing increasingly palm oil for their consumption. Okay, so there is what I want to underline here is that we're talking about a global market. It's not just one exporting country, it's not domestic. Palm oil belongs to the most globalized commodities in the world. So we're talking about a global market. That also means that it's subject to a lot of discussion at the global level. So as you all know, palm oil is the most important vegetable oil today in terms of both production and trade. And it's also the most contested vegetable oil. Although you may also discuss soybean oil and other vegetable oils, actually at the moment palm oil is the most contested among them. We may have a discussion why that is the case, but I think we have to recognize that it is a fact. And it's particularly contested within Europe, European Union, some countries in the European Union, and to a lesser degree in the US, and it's part of real public debate. Actually, last week I was on the national radio in the Netherlands in the program answering questions from listeners on palm oil, and you can see there's a lot of concern about the negative impacts that are seen in the eye of many citizens. And so it's not just some NGOs, it's not just some political groups, it's really widespread. And I'm not arguing that they are correct, that's a different discussion, but it is there, so we have to recognize that as an important fact. Yes, and then important to be aware of that. Most people in Europe and the United States never see any palm oil. They don't use palm oil as a cooking oil. If they use any cooking oil, that may be either olive oil or sunflower oil, but they hardly use any palm oil as cooking oil. So the only way they recognize palm oil is when they look at the small prints of any products, when there's an indication that vegetable oil is used for some products, for chocolates, for shampoos, etc. And then in the prints they can find that it's palm oil. But it's an important thing to notice that palm oil is something that basically is not associated with the products that people consume in Europe and the United States or other countries, but it's rather connected to the production. The image of palm oil is an issue of production. If we then look at the public perception of palm oil in Europe, and I'm building on a survey that by the Kantar Bureau in earlier this year, it's not publicly available, I think, but I got access to that. It was requested by the European Palm Oil Association. And they verified, they asked questions among many consumers in many countries in Europe, but also the Middle East. They found that there were three key issues that concerned consumers in Europe in particular. These are the health issue, environmental impact, and social impact on local communities with respect to palm oil. And what they did, they compared palm oil with all other vegetable oils. So in the end, they found that palm oil is often seen as harmful for human health by consumers, and particularly containing harmful fats. Yes. The environmental impact, palm oil is often seen as having negative environmental impact by the European consumer more than any other vegetable oil. And the social impact, palm oil is seen by quite some European consumer, although there is more variation, as having negative impact on local communities. Most respondents did not select any of the oil as being negative for the local communities, and that was different compared to the environmental impact. So social impact was less outspoken with respect to palm oil, but environmental impact was clearly seen as a concern among the public. At the same time, they found out that also that the actual knowledge of palm oil was rather limited among European consumers. But nevertheless, these observations are a reality in the public and political debate, because these images do play a role in decision making among the European governments and the European Union authorities. So we can conclude that in the political and public debates in Europe on palm oil concerns, deforestation, the threat to species survival, and then in particular the image of the orang-utan as a sort of a symbol of biodiversity, and the environmental damage due to the release of carbon from particularly peaty soils, and the social consequences due to social conflicts on displaced communities and illegal land grabs. These are concerns that are present in the current debate in the European Union. And again, I'm not arguing that this is true or not. It's as a social scientist, I know that these images do play a role in how different actors, governments, NGOs, and also citizens' organizations respond to the challenges of palm oil. So on this basis, there's a public concern, there's a global commodity flow going on from Southeast Asia in particular to other parts in the world. You can see that there are a number of initiatives to address these points, social and environmental concerns. The global palm oil initiatives can be differentiated. These multiple concerns have driven a number of private initiatives, and particularly the RSPO, the Roundtable Sustainable Palm Oil, is a well-known private regulation, so there is no government involvement there. Then we have hybrid regulation, particularly with respect to biofuels, and I give the example of the ISCC as a core organization in that respect. And then we have public regulation, the MSPO in Malaysia and the ISPO in Indonesia. So first I want to go over all of these initiatives. First start with the Roundtable Sustainable Palm Oil, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative, and it's aimed to secure a global market based on economic, social and environmental sustainability. So these three principles, the three P's on the bottom line, as Professor Norman just mentioned, the triple bottom line, that's the aim of the RSPO. And currently the organization has nearly 660 members. That can be including private companies, NGOs, financial institutes, etc. Already about 11 years ago, the RSPO has developed a certification scheme for sustainable palm oil. So they give a definition of what is sustainable palm oil, and it is allowing producers to be certified according to that standard. And at the moment, sustainable palm oil covers about 90% of the global palm oil market, about just over 13 million tons, produced from 3,760,000 hectares. So that's substantial. And when we look at the growth over the years, we can see that there has been a rapid growth since 2008 until about 2013-14, and then this growth has slowed down, and actually in the most recent figures give a reduction of the area. This is the volume. The hectares. The hectare is actually being reduced. So there is an issue here on the aim of the RSPO to create a global market based on sustainability and the limited area that is certified according to the RSPO. Then when we look at the countries that have areas that are certified, we can see that Indonesia is by far the largest, has the largest area RSPO certified. Then just over 50% compared to Indonesia. Malaysia is following, then Papua New Guinea, and then other countries like Brazil and Colombia, etc. Several other countries have an area, but that's generally much more limited compared to Indonesia and Malaysia. One of the reasons why this area that is RSPO certified is limited is because basically only the European market is demanding RSPO certification. So there is a limited demand for RSPO certification. And in 2017, nearly 70% of all palm oil imported in the European Union was RSPO certified. So a large amount was certified according to the RSPO. In the Netherlands that was even higher, 88%. Also the palm oil imported for animal feed, 50, so not for human consumption, but for animal feed, 56% of it was RSPO certified. And the Netherlands is relatively important because it's by far the largest importer of palm oil in the European Union. And that's because the harbor of Rotterdam is importing, is the largest importer, and that is then afterwards transported further down the line to other countries in Europe like Germany and processed in the Netherlands and then really sold again, exported again. Europe, RSPO certification is very important, and this other figure also confirms that the majority of palm oil imported in the European Union is RSPO certified. And also when it is processed and taken up in the food industry, an important part is certified. The majority of it is based on physical separation. So not on book and claim, which is a paper trail on certification, but really separated certified palm oil. So that is also a recent trend that processors, importers, processors, and finally retailers demand certified sustainable palm oil that is separated, so they are sure that what they sell is produced in a sustainable way according to the RSPO certification. And one more slide to underline the broad, say, political support and also social support in Europe for sustainable palm oil. This is an overview of the European countries with national palm oil initiatives. And as you can see, most countries, particularly Western European countries, North and South, have made claims, made agreements on their import on sustainable palm oil. So, for instance, we started, the print is quite small, so I apologize for that. But if you can see, the Norway, which is on the top, has the goal of 100% certified sustainable palm oil by 2015, and to add additional targets in 2018. So the aim is quite substantial, and I think most of the countries aim for 100% import of sustainable palm oil, certified sustainable palm oil. Some consider that to be RSPO certified, but it can also be certified in another way. So that means that the pressure from the importing countries, whether it's the European Union as a whole, but also the national governments on sustainability, is still very much present. Okay, so that's on the RSPO as a certification scheme, a private certification scheme. Now I want to move to a second example, which is biofuels. Because biofuels is interesting as it leads to what is called a hybrid governance arrangement. And hybrid governance arrangements mean there is close collaboration between public actors and private actors. And they are really much involved together to promote more sustainability. And to give a brief background, the European Union aims for 10% renewable fuel for transport in 2020. And they also aim for an overall reduction of 6% of the greenhouse gas intensity from the fuel mix in 2020 compared to 2010. So a reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions. Initially, should say that biofuels were seen as the most attractive way to achieve those outcomes. But it has been contested, it has been discussed, so increasingly you see a move away from biofuels as the best, most attractive way forward towards maybe electric vehicles or other kind of cars to achieve this outcome. But still biofuels is an important option. But the EU only accepts biofuels to be part of this strategy if it is produced in a sustainable way. And the definition they gave to what is sustainable in terms of the biofuels, that it is not produced from land with high biodiversity, is not produced from converted land that had a high carbon stock, Overall, of course, it should contribute to sufficient reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a calculation that needs to be made for each produce that is based on each biofuel that is produced. Now, these conditions can be applied directly when the biofuel is produced completely within the European Union. But if it's not, as the feedstock for the biofuel is not produced within the European Union, it's not possible for European authorities to verify whether these conditions are met. So, as a solution, the European Union asks imported biofuels to be certified according to these standards by private certification bodies. So these private certification bodies then have to be recognized by the European Union before they can be recognized as an important, we call it legally binding certification scheme. So they have a number of them recognized, and the most important one is ISCC, but there are also others like Bonsucro, the RTRS, the Roundtable on Responsible Soy, the RSB, the Roundtable on Sustainable Biofuels, etc., etc., including the RSPO. RSPO certification may also secure the sustainability of biofuels for the European Union. Now, when we look at the imports from in the European Union on biofuels with respect to feedstocks over the 2009 to 2016 from the European Union, we can see that the imports of biofuels that the use of biofuels is increasing. Not in the recent years, not very much actually, is slightly going down. But for us here, the most important part is the red one, which is palm oil. The red one is the palm oil imported for biofuels. And you can see it's a substantial part, particularly in recent years, since 2013, 13, until 2016, and still until today. It's an important part of the feedstock mixture. The light blue one is the EU own production of vegetable oils, and the purple one is other vegetable oils other than palm oil. Palm oil is an important part of the mix as the basis of biofuels within the European Union. And the market share for the different vegetable oils in the European biofuels is clear. There is the European, mainly European rapeseed, which counts for about 60%. Important, but down from 80% in 2010. And palm oil is about 1/3 of the European feedstock mix. So that means that palm oil is very important also for biofuels. And the ISCC, the International Sustainability and Carbon Certification Scheme, is the most important certifier of biofuels for the European Union. And they have certified about 5.6 million tons of certified palm oil in 2015. These were the latest figures I could find in terms of the overall area. And that includes 353 palm oil processing companies that were certified in 2017. In 2016, these compliant companies produced about 22 million tons of FFB. So that's a substantial area, and that means that these private companies are really influential in allowing palm oil to be imported within the European Union to be used for biofuels. However, as mentioned, there is this decision by the European Parliament early this year, in January this year, where the European Parliament decided that palm oil should I apologize for those who had copies, because this slide is not on it. I added it last evening to include this. So, but anyway, it's an illustration of the complexities involved in palm oil governance. The European Parliament decided early this year that palm oil should be phased out as a feedstock for biofuels by 2021. This is a decision by the European Parliament, but the democracy within the European Union is quite complex. So this is a decision by the European Parliament, but does not mean that it is implemented in this way, because actually it is rather an advice to the European Council and to the European Commission. Because in the end, the decisions, the formal decisions, are not made by the European Parliament, but by the European Council. And the European Council is the collection of heads of state of the European Union. So whether or not this will actually be implemented depends on further discussions within the European Union. But it shows that palm oil is acquiring a particular position. And when analyzing this decision, it's also a quite strange decision, because the European Union has given definitions on what is sustainable biofuel, no matter what the feedstock is. If it is rapeseed oil, canola oil, soybean oil, or palm oil, they should fulfill the same standards. But now, in this decision, the European Parliament takes out one certain feedstock and considers that by definition unsustainable, which means that they have their general definition of sustainability is no longer valid anymore. So it becomes a very confusing discussion. If they think that palm oil or some palm oil is not sustainable, then they should refine their general definition of sustainability in biofuels. They should not exclude a particular category, because there is basically no real reason for doing that. So it's a challenging debate that is going on, and it's also unclear what actually the basis of that decision is. Is there any scientific basis for such a decision? It is confusing. It seems rather symbolic, I would argue, than based on scientific arguments. Nevertheless, it does play a role in the future discussion. But I would be very curious to see whether this decision by the European Parliament will actually be implemented by the European authorities. I would really doubt that. But I'm not a politician, I'm just a scientist looking at this process from a sideline. But we will see in the coming months what this will lead up to. So the conclusion on this situation is that the proliferation of private standards in biofuels is really confusing. There is a lack of incentives to really achieve the desired outcome. So there is need for collaboration, for further agreement on what's actually the goal. Is the goal to have sustainable biofuels, or is the goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the fuel used in the European Union? That's not clear, and in the end that means that there are a whole lot of discussions going on at the same time. And one of the obvious conclusions is that despite there is general standards on what sustainability means with respect to biofuels, there's still ongoing discussion. So the debate is not closed, although the intention was to have it closed by offering overall standards for sustainability. So that's why this biofuel discussion is confusing, is important, and unclear what the actual outcome is. But at the same time, it's important because about 1/3 of all palm oil imported in the European Union is used for biofuels. So it is really an important decision what it entails. And it shows the importance of engaging with these debates on sustainability and the public image of palm oil. Now, one of the initiatives taken by producing countries is to develop their own standards. So we have the MSPO, the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil Standard, which was developed by the Malaysian government and launched in 2013. The implementation officially started a couple of years ago. It has standards for the production, sustainable management of palm oil plantations, smallholders and processing facilities, and also supply chain certification to make sure that what is in the end supplied is fulfilling the standards. These standards were developed and implemented, but they are as it's a legal standard, they are mandatory standards for all producers in Malaysia. And as far as I know, they have to be fulfilled by smallholders by the end of next year, 2019. But others, RSPO certified plantations, which should be quite straightforward by the end of this year, and other larger entities by the middle of next year. What I could find in terms of data was that earlier this year, a total of 758,923 hectares and 70 mills were certified, which means about 13% of all total plantation area of 5.8 million hectares in Malaysia. So there's still quite a long way to go, but as I mentioned, it were figures from earlier this year, so there may already have been a change. But particularly with respect to smallholders, there is a big challenge ahead, as just over 5% of the smallholder area is certified by the middle of this year. So we talk about 35,000 smallholders with just over nearly 120,000 hectares. So it's an initiative which is still challenging to fulfill its promise that all palm oil produced in Malaysia is actually certified according to the MSPO. Indonesia also developed its national standard, the ISPO, Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil Standard, introduced even before the MSPO, already in 2011. And it's supposed to be mandatory for all palm oil growers by 2020. So they have a longer time frame than Malaysia. The latest figures I could find for Indonesia were last year, August, and there about 17% of its 11.9 million hectares were certified according to the ISPO. That means 1.9 million hectares producing 8.2 million CPO, tons of CPO. And I couldn't find specific figures on the number of smallholders or the area that were included. But 306 ISPO certificates were granted to 304 Indonesian palm oil companies. So there is also an important gap between the ambition of having all palm oil in Indonesia certified by 2020 and its current score, as far as I can see. And that would add to my concern that there is quite a lack of transparency to the outside world on what the actual performance is of Malaysia MSPO to a certain extent, but particularly Indonesian ISPO, as no figures for this year were available on the internet, which means there is a challenge with respect to transparency. So we can see a range of public and private initiatives in terms of promoting sustainability in palm oil. We mentioned in this presentation the RSPO, the ISCC, but there's also organic palm oil. There are different private initiatives by companies and NGOs. There is the no deforestation initiative, and there are several other initiatives by private companies. There's also public standards. I mentioned the MSPO and the ISPO. And there's hybrid regulations, the biofuel that I already mentioned, but also the Amsterdam Declaration a couple of years ago, where governments committed to support sustainable commodity chains. So governments involved, they make use of existing sustainability standards, and they cover a number of commodities, including palm oil, but also cocoa and soy. In the end, with respect to palm oil, as I mentioned, it leads to a confusing figure, a confusing situation. Here you can see, where am I? Yeah. The total palm oil landscape, the land, the production, the fiscal, trade and finance dimensions. And here we have formal regulation and informal regulation, private initiatives here in the blue, and government legally binding initiatives. And you can see that the RSPO, which I presented, the ISCC, ISPO and MSPO are part of that landscape, and they have to operate, they are operating in that landscape, where also other regulations, other government actors are involved. So this is to underline that this is a complex environment in which you have to navigate to promote more sustainability. There's not an easy way out. That's actually what my conclusion is. Each initiative probably adds up to the complexity. But it is important to recognize that there are these government regulations next to existing voluntary regulations. And they are operating at different scales, at different levels. So I don't want to go into all the details of this figure, just to underline the complexity of the challenges that we are facing today with respect to sustainability in palm oil and the many initiatives that are going on. So then the question is how to deal with that complexity. Basically, that's a key question for us today. We can see there are many initiatives. Obviously, collaboration is required, but that means that public and private initiatives should collaborate. North and southern initiatives should also be involved at the same time. They should collaborate again. And in fact, what we can see is that very often the southern perspective is ignored in these dialogue, because these policy dialogues seem to be dominated by a number of concerns from the northern hemisphere, rather than an equally managed discussion where interests from all sides are included. And I think it's an important point to make sure that all perspectives are respected and included in the discussion. I think for the moment, but that may also change in the future, of course, depending on the discussion, but there are a number of focal dialogues, focal areas that should be considered, and that's particularly the high conservation value areas, because that's where biodiversity is located, that's where the biodiversity hotspots are, and that's where most concerns are with respect to the future of biodiversity. And the other focal area there is the high carbon stock area, because as we all know, global warming is really an important threat to the humanity, basically, worldwide. And palm oil, particularly the peaty soils in palm oil areas are an important contributor to global warming. And therefore, those areas with high carbon stocks deserve protection. Then responsible finance. I think there will be an increasing discussion on financing new investment in the palm oil industry, and my expectation is that there will be a more and a stronger confrontation with the investors and their sustainability criteria, the sustainability considerations. And obviously also smallholders needs particularly support, as they are in a relatively weak position in the market, but also with respect to sustainability certification, because that's very challenging for many of them to how to be certified, how to fulfill the criteria that are most of the times based on plantation practices of larger scale plantations by firms, by companies that have sufficient capacity to deal with the administrative burden and also the technological burden that often involved in certification. So how to deal with the smallholders? Overall expected to be around 4 million smallholders, so we are talking about quite a large number of people involved in palm oil production, smallholder production. So they deserve specific attention with respect to their involvement in sustainability standards, as well as part of the global production networks themselves. So the collaboration between different governance arrangements, I think the goal of such collaboration should be the strengthening of accountability and transparency within the value chains or within the supply chains. So producers and consumers should be informed about the level of sustainability in palm oil. As well as increasing the empowerment of smallholders, I mentioned before, and identify and develop new incentives to increase the uptake of sustainability practices. As you may remember, the score of the RSPO is not increasing, it's actually going down. So the question is, how can we increase that area, or should we replace maybe RSPO by another initiative? I mean, that's not the only option, of course, but if we want to have an equal playing field where all producers are participating in sustainable production, then there should be a much larger area and a much larger number of producers certified according to those standards. And maybe we should consider alternative ways forward in terms of the production. One of the discussions that is going on is whether or not multiple cropping initiatives could be a way forward to increase agrobiodiversity and to protect a number of these values that are threatened by expansion of palm oil. And also by covering some of the costs in replacing existing palm oil plantations when they are at the end of their life cycle. and also forms of regional or landscape governance. And what I mean by that is we are now talking about one standard which covers all palm oil everywhere around the world. If you are RSPO certified, it can be done in Peninsula Malaysia or in the Amazon forest of Brazil. It's all the same standard. But maybe we should look for more specific standards, if you talk about RSPO, I should say, but also by biofuels. Maybe we should think of more regionally specific standards and then recognize the regional specificity of the production environment, maybe also that of the quality of the end product. Maybe the comparison is not completely correct, but you think of wine. Wine has a regional denomination. We talk about Bordeaux wine, and we talk about Bourgogne, and these are different areas where wine is produced. And they are all, each of these wine producing areas have their own particular standards of quality and of producing. So that's maybe that's a bit too far, but you can think of more regional specific standards that make a particular palm oil stand out with respect to the others they are competing with. So we could think of more innovative ways of promoting sustainability and then rewarding those producers that get involved in the process. So I'm coming to my conclusions of this presentation. I've underlined that palm oil is a global commodity, subject to many challenges and involving many producers, NGOs, governments, as well as consumers and public citizens, public concerns, and the media. So these are all actors involved in governing the sustainability of palm oil. So together they create a complex mix of challenges. So the current governance landscape on palm oil is complex and confusing, because where to go? Talk about public and private exporters, importers, national, international standards. My only conclusion is at the moment that, considering this confusing and complexity, the only way forward is to collaborate. And that collaboration means dialogue with respect to on the different positions and the different views, and to collaborate to create synergies in the governance initiatives, and because in the end the collaboration is only collaboration that will generate the impact that is needed, both for producing countries and for consuming countries. So the big question is how to drive this process. Who is able to enhance and to strengthen this dialogue? That's a question for which I have no answer yet. So if you have any answer to that, I really welcome your contribution in that sense. So I want to thank you very much again for your interest, your presence, and I welcome questions and comments from the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our distinguished speaker, Professor Eng. Dr. Peter Oosterveer, for the fruitful lecture. Members of audience, ladies and gentlemen, now we would like to open the floor for the question and answer session. So warmly welcome for all the guests to participate.
Thank you. I'm Sherry from Australia. First question, some of my statements are just statements, and I have some interesting questions. We've been studying land use and climate change in Malaysia for the past 30 years. And we have tracked all palm development over those 30 years. And of course, if you track back all our oil palm, from forests. They originally come from forests, whether in the 60s or in the 70s. So meaning that we took over forests to eradicate poverty is real. There's statistics, there's scientifically proven. No rocket science for this. Everything can practice on open source. And we also looked at issues of oil palm encroaching central forest spines. That is our forest. We support big habitat mammals, not orangutan probably, but elephants and bears and all those big animals. I don't know what they are. But it's real because they attack this elephant and they track this elephant and the bears and God knows what, and we know exactly where they are. And we map them. You're welcome to see all this mapping that we do for the whole country. Most of our sponsors are RU grants, many Endowment, and the government. So my question is, and also we've tracked exactly which communities that has been displaced. And some of these communities are suing, you know, they are very hot areas and things like that. But you're welcome to see also how some of them even open forests for durian farms and that kind of stuff. And we can track them and we can have a face to this encroachment, to whether all palm encroachment forest or whether it's all other things that encroach forest. We have a name now to these faces that's normally being hidden, especially all palm. So we can expose them if we want, but unfortunately they give us the money, so we have to keep that up. Number two, my question is this, I just want to be positive. We clear forests in the early days, we know why, because we are poor. And some of our poverty has been cured, mostly because of this clearing of the forest. But our question is, we have been, this sinful act, which the European have been cursing us and boycotting us for killing our forests. Because we are poor. We need to take forests to develop some of our economies and so on. But the issue is, what is done is done. It cannot be undone. But can we do valuing environmental offset programs, like forests, where we do bad thing about forests? We have this red program. We make up for putting forests elsewhere. Can we do offset program for sins made by oil palm farmers or plantation by putting oil palm on peat, which is a big sinful thing to do, or on forests? Can we? If I calculate all this sinful that has been done by all these oil palms, not smallholders, but big guys like Sandavi, can you forgive us? Can this European Union look at it and consider it? Because what is done is done. We can be cutting all our oil palm and throw it away and therefore jeopardize our economy. Now, can this European Union look at it and take it seriously that we are mending all our sinful things and we are trying our best to rectify what is unsustainable and make it sustainable in the future? Can you share that with us? Thank you.
Well, that is that indeed the promotion, the expansion of palm oil has been an important contributor to the economic development and social development of both Malaysia and Indonesia. So I think that should be recognized, and I think that's also recognized. And that has been one of the consequences has been the cutting of forest and the expansion of plantation areas. I think that's obvious. If I understand well, there are about just over 50% of the country is still forested areas. So that's still substantial. I know it's not a fair comparison maybe, but the Netherlands, small country, is also known as Holland. And actually, Holland means in our local language, woodland. So that means that area was completely forested several hundred years ago. And now we only have a small area of forest left. So it's not just in Malaysia, but also many other parts of the world that development has been combined with the exploration and sometimes destruction of natural resources. So what I find important is to engage in that discussion. I don't think the European Union should forgive Malaysia for expanding its plantation area. There's no need to that. There is no reason for that. Because the discussion is not what happened 30 years ago. The discussion should be on what is taking place nowadays. So as I concluded in my last slide, the core is the dialogue and to explain and to dialogue on these issues. What are these concerns, and how to respond to that? And you should not do that as a position of demanding forgiveness. You should do that from the position of this is how we choose to promote sustainability in palm oil. That's the basis for the dialogue. And I think if you have good arguments for explaining this is the way we think we protect our social interest, our economic interest and our ecological interest, not just for Malaysia but also for the world in the largest sense, because talking about global warming is not just a national Malaysian interest but a global interest. And biodiversity is also a global interest, but combining those interests and making a choice that you explain to the rest of the world, I think is the only way forward. We cannot, maybe that's the only answer I can give. Being open on the discussion that is going on, explaining that choices have to be made, because, well, in the end, if the use of palm oil as vegetable oil for the different industrial uses and etc. is not, then it has to be replaced by some other vegetable oil. And in the end, all vegetable oils have some pros and some cons. As there's no ideal vegetable oil that covers only good things. Everyone has, each of these oils has their own environmental impacts, social economic impacts, health impacts, industrial, I call it utility. They all have their own particular characteristics. And so in that balance, it has to be, it's underlined that palm oil has a particular place in that mix of different vegetable oils. And that's the start of the dialogue, I would argue. Not ask for forgiveness. I don't think that's the way forward.
Is there a record on offset program? All palm offset program?
Of all palm offset program. And not as far as I know. I mean, that could be included in the RED process, but that's not the RED, I call it the Renewable Energy Directive, but the REDD, which is on energy, on forest conservation. But I'm not a specialist in that, and as far as I know, that does not include palm oil.
I'm trying to do that. What I'm trying to suggest is that whatever that we can calculate the emission that you did, meaning that we can calculate now carbon stock above the ground, carbon stock below the ground, generated by oil palm. And what is being lost, we can still calculate how to put it back, but not on oil palm, but on other programs.
Yeah.
So that you know, let RED plus program, where when you lost your emissions and you stock it back somewhere. But it's along that line, can we, or people have to move on. You're right, I agree with you. I'm so tired of being used, being said that we have done it, and I know that. And I've been trying to advise all farm, especially Samdami, to be transparent. I agree, because they're not transparent. And nowadays people are smart, they can still do it by themselves. They can still do that. And the European did that. That's why they know what's going on. So if this offset program, meaning that you are now calculating valuing the one that you destroy, and it's on peak, for instance, which is really the most simple thing to do, and we put it back elsewhere, just as good. We cannot be perfect, by putting it back, stock it back, or store it back to the earth. But there are many ways now.
Well, I think it's a very good suggestion. But I think the priority should be to make sure that in any new investment and new activity, there's not an increase of the greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that should be an important criteria for future investment. And if compensating for already lost greenhouse gas emissions, I think that will be a good initiative. But for the moment, I think priority should be not increase it any further. Any other question?
Good morning, Prof. My name is Rafiza. I'm from MPOB. I would have some, regarding your slides just now that you said you had yesterday evening about the development of renewable energy directive 2. From my understanding, there's a latest development towards what is currently happening in the EU, where following the 5th trilogue on the 13th of June this year, and also plenary session, I think early this month, 13 November, if I'm not mistaken, they have adopted a compromise text where they say that the word of phasing out palm oil has been removed from the text, and the binding target now is moved to 32% of renewable energy directives, and we're now looking at phasing out more to high-risk oil rather than looking at specific oils. Well, that's what EU is saying about the EU red. My question to you is that is this development is also a way for the EU to bypass the WTO regulations, instead of using palm oil directly in the text, but they're using other methods such as NO. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the addition, and which is actually confirming what my point was, that it's not possible to separate to identify a particular feedstock and take that out of the equation if it fulfills the general criteria. Whether that involves WTO concerns, I guess so. There are already discussions within the WTO about palm oil exports, and actually also soybean exports. And separating a particular product like palm oil, thereby targeting particular countries, actually Malaysia and Indonesia, does not fulfill in general the criteria of the WTO to have a fair competition. Competition should only be based on the quality and the characteristics of the products, and not it's not allowed according to the WTO to distinguish according to the way in which it is produced. So if the palm oil fulfills the criteria of the WTO, the criteria of the European Union in terms of sustainable biofuels, then it has to be accepted. And if not, there can be a very good supported case for the WTO. So I am sure that the European Parliament did not take the WTO considerations into account, but the other authorities within Europe do, because they know that there will be a problem when they maintain that decision and separating one particular feedstock from the equation. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, Prof. Long time no see. Okay. 2 years ago, I presented to Prof. We had my group under MPOB grant. By the way, I'm from UKM. We did a systematic review on the sustainability of our nation goals, particularly on the small farmers, because during that 40% of our growers are from small farmers. And we found that our small farmers has difficulty in even achieving MSPO. And how could we get them into RSPO when European is now hitting on RSPO? And now my question is, Prof come with this hybrid arrangement. Is this hybrid arrangement extra criteria into your RSPO, into the RSPO? Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Very challenging question. Because in the end, that question comes back to whether we can have different levels in terms of certification. Do we have a specific certification for smallholders, or smallholders starting up to become more sustainable? And then if they perform at a certain level, they get a higher degree, and then they have in the end fulfilled all the criteria, then they are certified according to the final definitive standard. There was a meeting from the RSPO, I think a couple of weeks ago, and I read an interview with the vice, well, I'm not sure, the vice chairman or the vice secretary general, one of the leading persons in the RSPO, and his suggestion was to see MSPO as a startup phase for smallholders to become certified, and then allowing them later to enter into the RSPO. So that would be combination and hybrid arrangement with the two, with the private and the public standard. But you are arguing that even MSPO may be too difficult for some of these small.
We are working on it.
Okay.
Through the review, I guess our small farmers can do that.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, if MPOB and the rest of the stakeholders try to help.
I know we have some presentations when I was here in May about the work of the organization to support smallholders in doing that. So. And so the question then is, do we want to have different levels of performance in a standard? And I think that would be a good way of moving ahead, of avoiding that it's all or nothing. Because especially for producers with limited resources, it's very difficult to make this large jump to fulfill all the criteria. So why not support them in having one or two intermediate stages before getting to that final stage? And that, because then you are able to bring many more people in the process rather than only a selected group. And so that's and I think there public and private collaboration is actually necessary. You need the involvement of governments in supporting smallholders, but you also need the involvement of private companies to make sure that the mills and the processing industry, to make sure that these steps are being made, the support is given, and you need involvement of NGOs to make sure that the image in the public eye is also supporting to those steps. So there is an involvement with the public and private actors necessary. However, in the end, certification is not enough if there's no demand for certified products. And there is a critical issue that you may intend to certify 100% of all palm oil areas in Malaysia and Indonesia, ISPO, MSPO, RSPO, whatever, but the demand for such products, the willingness to pay for the extra cost involved is not 100%. It's only a part of the market. So there is a problem of supply and demand, basically, an economic question, and also how to divide the cost involved. Because and in addition, as long as not all production areas are sustainably certified, there is always room for criticism, because there's always a group, a part that is not performing according to the sustainability standards. But that, as long as that is not achieved, there's always room for criticism, but on the other hand, there's not 100% demand for certified products. So there is a difficult imbalance between the two, to which I don't have a solution, by the way, but it's important to realize that as well. Yeah.
Good morning. My question, maybe you can share your opinion, because this smallholder now they used to plant cocoa in Malaysia. In fact, if you do some survey, most of the land title is still in cocoa plantation. And then this community is not viable for the smallholder to survive. Then they change to rubber tree. Now rubber tree also is a gone case. Now today, as said today, the price of this commodity on the daily price for the smallholder is below 300 ringgit, which this occur, then they don't buy fertilizer for the to use for the in their plantation. The effect is today the price is low, they cannot survive. Another 1.5 years, 2 years along the road, because they don't take care of the plantation, and the price may be up for the next year, but they still cannot harvest the product, the tree. So, from your opinion, what are the directions for this smallholder to survive? What are the commodity that they can plant to survive for the future? Because all along the way, this group of people that suffer a lot. Not all there's this big plantation, they don't suffer. Okay, yes.
Yeah, thank you. The simple way to answer would be that smallholders are part of global markets, so they depend on global prices. So there's only one way to adapt to that, is to reduce production or move to other activities. But I know that's not that easy, especially not with perennial crops like rubber or palm oil or oil palm, because that crop is there for maybe 20-25 years. So when you make that basic investment, you stick to that for quite a long time period. What you can see is basically there are two strategies. One is to diversify, to reduce dependency on one particular crop, so that's where pleas for multi-cropping, trying to combine different activities. So in agriculture and beyond agriculture, those suggestions are suggesting to diversify the source of income, not to be dependent on just one crop, because the prices of crops always go up and down. They vary. They're not stable because it depends on demand, on production, etc. So that's one strategy, and that as far as I know, most smallholders opt for that strategy to either add additional agricultural activities or outside agricultural sources of income to do that, to compensate for the losses. The other way would be to increase scale and to improve the efficiency of the production system, to lower the costs and to be able to compete with others and at a lower cost price. And that means that you have to invest and you have to increase the scale. That's a different strategy that not all smallholders will take, but that may be an option for some of them. Moving, of course, farmers can move from one commodity to another, but there is at the moment not one commodity which is really securing high income. Actually, most of the prices on the global market are in a downward trend, and they have been such a trend, downward trend, since the 1950s. So there is, in general, the price of food products or agricultural products is not increasing, is going down. There's a continuous push for reducing the cost and increase the efficiency. And there's not one crop that will guarantee you'll have a high income for the rest of your life. So that's the uncertainty that smallholders are facing. Okay.
Thank you to Professor and also the participants. Okay. So now, as a sign of gratitude and appreciation, let us now invite Yang Berbahagia, Associate Professor Dr. Hawati Janur, Manager of MPOB-UKM, Endowment Chair, to accompany Professor Dr. Norman Muhammad Saidin at Faculty of Economics and Management to present a token of appreciation to our distinguished speaker. Please welcome. Thank you, Professor. Please. Please welcome Yang Berbahagia Encik Balu Nabiapan, Director of Economics and Industry Development Division, Malaysia Palm Oil Board. Thank you, sir, and thank you, Professor. Dr. Peter Oosterveer, MPOB-UKM shareholder, for an interesting sharing. I hope that all the information are extremely useful for your intellectual consumption. And on behalf of the organizing committee, MPOB-UKM Endowment Chair would like to thank all of you for being here. The lunch will be provided at 12 p.m. at the Begonia Coffee House, and all the distinguished and participants are welcome for the lunch. Now we will proceed to the research proposal presentation by the Professor Dr. Peter Oosterveer, and we proceed with only the researchers here in this room. Until we meet again, thank you. Now proceed with the research proposal presentation entitled Public Perception of Palm Oil in Malaysia, that will be presented by Professor Dr. Peter Oosterveer. Please welcome, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much. What I would like to do is to present the proposal that I developed together with Professor on public perception of palm oil in Malaysia. And to explain the background, when I was here last time in May, we had a discussion with the MPOB on public perception in palm oil, and they expressed their also their concern or their about public perception in palm oil also in Malaysia. There has been, as I also introduced before the break in my lecture, there's quite some criticism in the among the European public on palm oil, and some of these questions and concerns and viewpoints may also be taken up by some groups in Malaysia. So there's an interesting question on how people in Malaysia look at palm oil. And so that's the start of this proposal. And so I developed it further, building on a research that has been done in early this year by a consultancy firm, Kantar, and they did a research among mainly different European country audiences, but also in Saudi Arabia, Turkey, well, quite a lot of countries. USA as well, USA, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Australia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, UK, Italy, France, Belgium, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Austria, Poland, and Czech Republic. So I think that would be an interesting comparison. So I want to briefly present my proposal and invite your comments to see where we can improve the idea and whether we can have your support in implementing it further. So the title is Public Perception of Palm Oil in Malaysia. And in general, we want to have a better understanding of how the public in Malaysia looks at palm oil. And particularly palm oil in comparison to other oils. And I will go into more detail further, but my hypothesis is that probably compared to most of the European audiences, the knowledge of palm oil in Malaysia is much higher than in Europe. So I'm considering whether that leads to different opinions. But I expect also in Malaysia to be differences between urban and rural, educated and less educated, younger and older people in the audience. So maybe we can go down a little bit further in the proposal, and then this is the domain. This is important. The research area, as a sociologist, like in this block, will also maybe linked to some of the other activities, some of the other domains like business and management and environment. So there's some overlap. But for the moment, I took the box of sociology. And then the proposal is to start November this year until the end of October next year for a period of 12 months to do the research. And then besides myself as the leader of the project, we have included other leaders of the research, Professor Hawaki and Professor Azar, to collaborate and to have this as a more common activity within the chair of the cluster of activities. Mentioned some of the requests, some other research projects I am involved in. I just mentioned some of those which I'm involved at the moment, and the funding. Where is it? The first one, Food Systems for Healthier Diet, is quite a large research project from the CT Institutes. It's led by IFPRI from Washington. Maybe well known, and collaborating with SIAT and Wageningen University, of course, and IITA from Africa, and Biodiversity International, and yeah, that's it. Yeah, and we have research in Vietnam, Bangladesh, in Africa, in Nigeria, and Ethiopia. Then there was a project on palm oil in Indonesia where we was involved on local communities and palm oil, and we did a start of a research, developed a proposal which is submitted, and we are waiting for the decisions hopefully before the end of the year. And for that I was at a workshop in Indonesia in July this year, closing the project. And then Missing Middle, that's research on the different supply chains in agriculture, working on Vietnam. I'm involved in Vietnam in the pork and the fresh vegetable supply chain. Then the request is some publications. I mentioned some recent one. The first one is it's already an accessible world development publication, but officially will be 2019. A chapter in a book that is just come out early this year. But so then basically below, this is the main thing, the executive summary of the proposal. So that's where we have the content. The argument is that public debates, public and political debates on palm oil often have a mix of facts, impressions, personal views, anecdotal evidence. So there's a lot of imagination and truth in the discussion on palm oil, particularly in importing countries. So that's a fact. But despite the fact that it's not all based on evidence and on proof, these impressions have an impact in policy making and in public image. We expect this to be the case also in Malaysia. So by analyzing the public perception and to see which different opinions there are, and also how that relates to different categories within society, as I mentioned, younger and older, higher and lower educated, rural and urban, and different income groups, we think to have a better understanding of these differences of opinion, and to, on the basis of that information, it becomes possible to develop a more appropriate strategy to inform and to communicate with those groups about palm oil and about the pros and cons of palm oil based on evidence instead of imagination and unfounded images. So by understanding how they view the thing, then you can develop a more appropriate strategy. That's basically the thinking of this proposal. For doing that, we suggest to have a survey among 800 representatives, survey among 800 respondents. So then we go a little bit further. Well, that's background on palm oil. I don't think I have to repeat that here. So then, as I mentioned, it builds on the work that has been done in Europe and the US on the counters that I mentioned. And then, more elaborate, this project contains a national survey among a random sample of 800 respondents across the different groups in urban and rural zones to involve questions at least in the following issues: the knowledge of and familiarity with palm oil compared with other oils, vegetable and non-vegetable, the sources of information about palm oil and the main topics that are discussed in these sources, these media, and then the perception on palm oil, the performance of palm oil with respect to human health, environmental impact, social impact, and economic development. Basically, that's the core of the research. And then the objectives, it says, so to investigate public perception of palm oil in Malaysia, to assess the differences in perception of palm oil between different categories in palm oil in Malaysian population, to assess, number 3, the degree of fact-based knowledge among different categories in Malaysian population, and 4, to formulate recommendations for communication strategies for MPOB to increase the factual basis of public perception of palm oil in Malaysia. So we want to strengthen the fact-based information. And then we continue in the methodology, basically in steps. As it is a survey, we start by developing the questionnaire, actually testing them, the questionnaire as well, collecting responses from 800 randomly selected respondents, processing the results, communicating the findings with UKM and MPOB, writing the report and the scientific journal article. The flow chart, which I can show later if needed, in the Gantt chart. And the milestones: start of the project at 1st of November, then we need a research coordinator, MSc students. I don't expect there to be 2 MSc students involved. Questionnaire to be completed early next year, tested and improved, and then in 3 months, hopefully the survey will be completed, and then the data processed and analyzed to generate a scientific report to be presented to MPOB, UKM and other interested stakeholders, then produce a scientific article, and then close the project end of October next year. That's the schedule. And then we go to expected results. I think we hope to find evidence-based understanding of the ways in which different categories of the population in Malaysia perceive palm oil. And this knowledge allows for comparison between the situation in Malaysia and these other countries, because we have as a reference point to study in Europe and the US. So we can easily compare and make sure that there is some overlap in terms of the questions. And that is the topics that are addressed. Scientific report and an article, academic journal for Q1, Q2 article will be produced. And well, the specific or potential application, that we expect this to be available for application by MPOB, but also by Malaysian government and others, for developing more appropriate and hopefully also more effective communication strategies. 2 master students are expected to be included, and the impact of society. An evidence-based understanding of public perception can form the basis of more effective communication strategy on palm oil in Malaysia. And then we come to the budget. Well, actually, Prof is better placed to inform about the budget, because my Malay is not very good to explain the details here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Prof. Peter. I think for the budget, I adjusted a little bit in terms of 2 MSCs. I proposed for 1 PhD.
Okay.
And then 1 more in terms of the MSc. We can pay them by daily rate and so forth. We just propose, then we'll get the comments from the rest. Salary and wages, we have 1 PhD, but this is for 2 years. your research is for 1 year, but basically we can provide for 2 years. Then I think we can change the tempo, duration of the research to 2 years. Because 1 year is probably a bit too short, I guess. Yeah. So the PhD student will take almost most of the budget in terms of 250 that we propose here. Because each month we'll be paying them 2,000 according to the UKM rate. For masters is 1,008. Yeah. So based on that for 8,000, and then 21,600 for the masters. Coming down will be traveling and transportation. This is about 60%. I did not calculate whether it satisfy the criteria of less than 40% of the total budget, but I think it is more or less there. This is in terms of field work and so forth, because we have to go out and do the survey and so forth. Saver and rental, this is in case we need like rental of cars or four-wheel drives, if it is like rural roads and so forth. Very minimal, about 12,000. But this budget could also be reduced, because if we don't use so much of rental, we can put back into the travelling expenses in the earlier votes. The vote number for your knowledge, this is the vote according to our research grants. So this is all stipulated there. For research materials, we just put about 5,000 each year. This is basically to buy any cartridges or papers, thumb drives and so forth that are relevant for the research materials. And then going downwards, maintenance and minor repair services. Usually, I don't think we will need in terms of repair, like our computers, we need to reformat, printer spoiled and so forth. I don't think it's necessary because we have the faculty facilities as well. And professional services, this is where we have our workshop for book publications, journal publications. In our case here, we focus more towards our Fatawan and Impact Factor journal publications. So we may invite experts that are maybe chief editor of any journals that Prof Peter might know, or you yourself and so forth. Then also we can also pay for editing services, because I think before we submit final draft and so forth, we need to go through the proofreading and editor by the language experts. Okay, accessories and equipment, I have here about 10,000 and 12,000 with the intention of probably buying computers or laptop if necessary. If otherwise, because I think most of the researchers that are going to be co-researcher with you, they all have their own system. Yeah? So this what they call this work here, we can also transfer to other works that we may deem necessary. Yeah? Total, Prof Peter's idea was 500,000. Yeah? I think it's too much over budget. Our manager say we cannot afford that much. She's saying only 200, but I purposely put 250 in the hope that we'll get. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's basically what I have to share with you. Sign. And then it's up to. So, any suggestions for questions, for clarification, or suggestions for improvements, or you're welcome. Please welcome any suggestion.
Thank you very much. Maybe I just would like to give my opinion or question. First of all, about the public perception of palm oil in Indonesia that is effective. Okay, then I start to ask questions because I put here perception about what, and Then you mentioned about the public image. But when your discussion just now, I tried to relate to the issues. Actually, how the understanding of the public perception in palm oil would solve the issue about cross-border perception of the palm oil. It is not about the local perception. It is about the perception of others, right? So how that could have impact towards the policy, because having the understanding about the public perception in Malaysia in general, would that be useful for the ministry to formulate policy on the palm oil? Second is about because you mentioned about publication in Q1 and Q2. So usually publication in Q1 and Q2 is always associated with original contribution to knowledge. Because as I see from the objective and also the methodology is more towards descriptive, to describe the nature of public perception. I'm not very familiar, that's why I'm asking, because usually in economics or in management we always have like association between variables. Okay, so I'm not so sure. I'm just asking. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. On your first question, on what is the use of looking at public perception in Malaysia. I remember the discussion we had in May with the MPOB, and the point was raised that it's difficult to promote Malaysian palm oil and in its strength and in its quality when there is increasing, that was their impression, let me say so, increasing concern also among the Malaysian population, young urban population about palm oil. But their argument was we cannot convince the European audience if we are not even able to convince our Malaysian audience of the sustainability and the safety, healthiness of palm oil. So that's where I was, the basis of developing this proposal was their concern that if the Malaysian population of certain groups in the Malaysian population has concerned about the health of the healthiness of palm oil or about the sustainability of palm oil, then that should be addressed first before you can communicate with the rest of the world about it. So that was the reason why. And I think there's a direct link between that national position and the international communication strategy. The second one, publication in international journal. Indeed, it has to be a noble contribution to science. But in sociology, we are less, I think, concerned about the models and then compared with economic publications. We could say evidence-based information and reflection on the public perception of in Malaysia of palm oil, in my view, could be an important contribution to the discussion. And I expect this to be a good basis for a paper that can be published in Q1, Q2 journal. Of course, we have to see if they accept it, so you never know. But it gives a contribution to a complex global debate, and I think they have a general interest in having the voice of producer countries like Malaysia heard in these publications. They have a certain interest in doing that. If it is based on good, thorough academic research, then I think it's possible to convince them on the innovative and the importance of such a publication.
Okay, regarding, thank you very much for your presentations and then your willingness to share with us. Regarding to the evidence-based research, I think this is we also want to learn from you so that we can promote this evidence-based. The only thing is that when, if I'm not mistaken, you talk about 800 respondents, Malaysia and 2 states in Johor, rural area in Johor. I think this is sufficient or not, because with this nowadays we talk about this fourth industrial revolutions where people talk about data analytics. Okay, and then I think it's better if we can introduce this new, not new, I think the only thing that what people are now doing on collecting data using this platform rather than the traditional way of collecting through you send a questionnaire and then if Prof Peter asks and then they're going to say, oh, everything's okay. I think we need intelligently looking into different perspectives, meaning that from different angles rather than directly ask questions to the respondents. But why not we take from different database so that we can profilings who use the Malaysians, who use the Malaysians palm oil, even though it's only in Malaysia, but maybe among the cluster groups of people, and then why they still consume olive, why they still consume rapeseed, is it for what purposes? And then those who buy rapeseed, those who buy in Tesco, which people. So I think that's more, what do you call it, can be more informative, very rich informations. Then I think we're going to learn it from you as well, rather than the traditional way of collecting data. That's my concerns on the, because palm oil, we have been doing that, I think for quite some time. Asking respondent, and especially when you talk about only Kuala Lumpur, and I think it's not diverse enough in Malaysia. Thank you very much.
If I may add.
Yeah.
Okay, from what I remember, during our discussion with MPOB people, okay, the focus of the promotion of this one is more into the exporting our palm oil products overseas. And we are lacking into the local consumption. So one of the issues that was raised in the discussions is that how we want to increase the local consumption on the palm oil products. Okay? Maybe in our project, our research projects, it would be good if we could include facts and figures on the local consumption of the competitors' products, okay, in line with what Dr. Tamat has mentioned just now. And we try to compare to the consumption of the palm oil product. Maybe it would be good to look into those information as well. And again, when we're talking about the IR4, okay, maybe it's high time for us to look into how we want to sell our palm oil products through these new technology things. Because now we have online business, things like that. So maybe this younger generation, they don't know. They farm our products, which one is good, which one is not, or maybe they would like to associate it with the status or things like that, and that's where our proposal is very relevant into that. I think that could be also included in our proposal. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so well, let me first answer this question on whether or not this is the correct research strategy. I agree that more focused research will generate more insightful information on motivations and understanding. So that's a qualitative research. So I agree that gives more in-depth understanding of why certain people buy certain products. The challenge, though, is that if you want to develop, say, hard evidence, then you need to also have a more representative and a quantitative representation of the large population. It's always to balance the depth of information and the representativeness. Because if you focus on particular groups, in particular supermarkets buying particular products, then indeed you get a better understanding, but then it's more limited in terms of the generalization that is possible. So it's a trade-off, and in many instances I would agree with you that a more in-depth qualitative research will generate more information, but I think in terms of convincing MPOB, convincing political stakeholders in Malaysia, a quantitative research will be more effective than qualitative. So what we could do, because could be to, if we have a little bit more time, as Professor is suggesting 2 years instead of my suggested 1 year, it could be to include a qualitative phase in the beginning to make the survey and the approach more appropriate to the specifics of Malaysian citizens, of Malaysian consumers. But then if you start with a qualitative phase, you have that basic information, you call it more in-depth information that can then generate several hypotheses that can be tested through a survey. Maybe that could be a good way of combining both the qualitative and the quantitative, more in-depth and the more, let's say, superficial, but also quantitatively representative information that we can generate. I think that would be a good suggestion to do that, because I still think that the representativeness is important in convincing some of the key actors here in Malaysia. And then, indeed, I could use this information not just for communication purposes, but also for promotion of the consumption of Malaysian palm oil. I think that if it becomes more clear where the issues are, then indeed also the the strategies to promote Malaysian palm oil domestically can be strengthened. I'm not really sure how to include IR4 in this research. I mean, it's an interesting suggestion, but that's where I'm a little bit lost in terms of what it actually would mean for the research. It could be a tool for further communication. Afterwards, it could also be maybe a tool that could be used for enhanced traceability of palm oil or new relationships. But I'm not really sure how to use it in the research because it's not yet implemented. So we're talking about potentially. I find it, that would be a different kind of research. Because then you have to test the potentialities of different solutions. And I am hesitating about that. Because then it gets, in my view, a little bit too broad. I see you discussing.
In terms of the application of the L4IR perspectives, nowadays we tend to research via WhatsApp, even Facebook and so forth. Basically, it's like instead of just using the conventional way of going to ask the respondent, as Dr. Tan has mentioned, what we do is we go online and they can answer us. We can even use apps. We can develop an apps and then we can just ask the consumers to answer our questions.
Okay, well that's on online survey. Yes, of course. I think that's fine. There's no particular need to go to every household to ask the questions. You can do an online survey. But for me, it's key that it is representative survey. So doing that may risk to exclude certain groups of categories of people. The elderly may not be very prompted to respond online. So you have to make sure that you still have this representativeness, but an online survey is fine.
So we may like classify them according to each group, and then we use the relevant tools to do this.
Approach them, yeah, I agree.
Because for example, if you just provoke them, palm oil is not good. Post that in your Facebook. So there are a lot of respondents. And then we can see they're coming from which countries? From Malaysia, from Indonesia, and then they're going to maybe bad words. But doesn't matter, we just want to get the response. Maybe from Latin America they also responded. So this is the way that I think genuine answer from some of these groups of people. But another thing is that, Prof. Peter, the main consumer of palm oil, one of course is domestic consumptions, but another one is industrial consumptions, meaning that they use it for industrial purposes. So can you include that as well, rather than only for consumer? Because for example, like McDonald's, KFC, these are big players, okay? And then the SME, small medium enterprises, where they deal with the foods. So I think you need to capture these portions of market as well, rather than only consumer.
Thank you. I'm hesitating a little bit because yes, it is also interesting to include those categories, but I want to avoid to make the research larger and larger because the focus is not necessarily on the consumers, but on public image. So even people who are not consuming palm oil at all could be included as a relevant respondent because the public image has a consequence for how companies respond, how NGOs respond, how policymakers respond. So the focus is on that public image and how that is developing and what the contents are and how it involves knowledge, actual knowledge of palm oil and other more imaginary elements. For example, in France, maybe also in other countries, but I've seen it in France that supermarkets are putting palm oil-free supermarkets on the outside of their company, of their shop. And that's not necessarily because the company doesn't want to have palm oil, but because it's the public image that palm oil is not good in France. So they think they can attract more customers by doing that. So the public image has an enormous impact also on the behavior of private companies. And whether or not that has a true base, that's less important than understanding what the actual image is. So that's why my focus would like to be on the public perception of palm oil rather than consumers and the consumption's possibilities of consumer groups. Yeah.
Okay, Peter, I think I'm concerned about the contributions, the communication strategies. But because the idea of the public image in Europe, I think it's quite obvious, but I think in Malaysia also it's quite obvious because most of it will have positive image of, I mean, even though you, in your house, you don't use palm oil for cooking, but still because this is from Malaysia. I will always give, I mean, I think the survey will also say very high results and so on and so on. So, I don't know what's the contribution of the human species communication strategy. Is there would be a different strategy or?
Yeah, because what I understand, but I am not. Well, you are better informed about the public debate in Malaysia than I am. But I understand from the discussion we have at the MPOB is that there are, particularly with respect to health complications there are topics discussed in the media on what the health of palm oil is in consuming palm oil in Malaysia. So that's one topic that deserves further research on whether that image of unhealthiness is present and among which groups it is present in Malaysia. Because depending on the group, you may have to adapt your information strategy, your communication strategy. And the other hypothesis was, but I would like to know, is that the more international discussion on sustainability problems with respect to palm oil, on shutting forests, etc., is taken up by a certain group, particularly among the young who are involved in this online communication, etc. So these are topics I expect to come out of the research, and then if that's, I mean, if it's substantial and if there's a lot of differences between different groups, you may need to adapt your communication strategy. That's the reason why. Thank you very much.